about my time in New Delhi. Okay, this is just the title. And the title is from a quote I really like that I'll talk about halfway through the presentation, so wait for it. Okay, so I guess I'll start. So over the summer, before I came to Harris, I was living with my 99-year-old grandparents in New Delhi, India, for an organization. I was working for an organization called Nazdeek, and it says, double-story building, that is a lie. There are 3 illegally constructed stories on top of that, so I worked on the 5th story of the double-story building over the summer. I took on 5 flights of stairs every day, and it really sucked. And on my first day, I got food poisoning, so I threw up at work. And I was like, this is going to be a great experience. So these are the people I worked with, Shreya and Jayshree, and they were really cool about me throwing up on my first day of work, and I threw up many more times. And one of those times that I threw up was when, so the Indian version of weed is called bhang, and my coworkers took me out to and after drinking that, I threw up for a week because I got food poisoning and it really sucked. Okay, so what I was actually doing when I wasn't drinking weed milkshakes was I was community organizing with people living in informal housing, also known as slums, in New Delhi. So the government in New Delhi is really anti-poor, which is not the same as anti-poverty. The Modi government is doing a lot of development and metro construction, and I met with the UN special rapporteur for housing, and she said development is a zero-sum game. So for every metro that's constructed, someone loses their housing as slums are being demolished. So we're working with these women living in slums to try to get them really basic human rights. And I thought a lot about what the flag that I really love stood for. The 3 colors on the flag stand for the earth, courage, and truth. And I wondered who this flag was really standing for, you know, the elite of India or the people whose houses were being demolished. And I thought about that a lot over the summer. So this is what we did over the summer. We brought these legal education trainings to informal housing in Delhi, and we teach people about what the government owed them, basically. So the government has made a lot of promises to the people of India, and they're not doing such a great job at keeping them. So what we do is we hold the government accountable, and we were a really rights-based organization, which basically means that we didn't do service delivery. And I asked my coworker Shreya why this was the case, and she said that there was this big case a couple years ago with rape crisis centers in Delhi. There was this really well-publicized rape case, and the government said, we're going to build all these crisis centers. And then NGOs said, we're going to build all these crisis centers too. And the NGOs built these crisis centers, the government built these crisis centers, and then the government was like, actually, we don't need to do this because NGOs are doing this. So they stopped doing it. The NGOs ran out of funding, and in the end, there were no rape crisis centers. So we basically held the government accountable to providing what they said that they would do, and we thought this would be more sustainable. So we went to people's homes. We worked largely with women. And I think this is really important because the woman said that, you know, they'd go to the men who were really in charge of their communities, and the men would be sitting around and they'd be drinking and smoking. They'd, you know, someone would come to them with a problem, they'd say, we can't fix this problem, and then a month later they'd be like, oh, we still can't fix this problem. But the women who were really having to deal with things like leaky roofs and not having enough food, they were the people who were interacting with their community members, and they could really make change. And so the last picture, you know, women are greater than the entire government, and we even put this on our funding reports. We thought it was really, really important that people were learning who was really in charge of these communities, and we were building a lot of confidence for women, which is something I'm going to come back to later. But I think that this empowerment and capacity building is the most important thing that we did. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and this is where the title of my presentation comes from. I'm going to let you guys read this, but I'm going to really quickly because there's 20 seconds. But remember that your real job is that if you're free, you need to free someone else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And I think, especially at University of Chicago, I did my undergrad here, we're always worried about the next internship and the next job and getting all these accumulations of successful things. And we need to remember that it's really not a grab bag candy game. That's something I need to remind myself all the time. So we were working with these women, and since we were so free, as the previous slide said, these people we were working with thought that we could really solve all their problems, and they'd be like, can you help me export cloth to India or cloth to America because you're from America? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about business. But they'd still really think that we could fix all of their problems, whether it was can you fix my leaky roof? Can you help my son get into college? And I really couldn't do any of those things because I was just really, really not qualified, 20-year-old living in India. So then how do you best free someone? You know, our legal education trainings sometimes weren't the most pressing things for people. So I met this girl on the left-hand side, her name is Pateri, and she couldn't come to our trainings after the second or third one because her father would beat her if she went out of her house. And I was having this really high-minded idea of, empowering people is really not doing a lot of good if they can't even come to our trainings. If they have these much more immediate, concerns of their safety and their well-being. And so how do you best free someone? Do you best free someone by having this big idea of large-scale change, or by really trying to solve the individual problems in people's lives, because that's what seems to be really more pressing to people. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you guys have ever seen this before, it basically says that if you don't have security in your food, water, warmth, rest, basic needs, you can't ever think about achieving self-actualization. And I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like total bullshit and like really elitist. I like really hate this pyramid. And I think this quote really alludes to why it's just not true. Like, I feel like Maslow like never met a real person in his real life who like had struggled with housing insecurity or food insecurity, because stories are so important, and we need to know how people die. That's really important, but we really should know how people live. And I think this is really true, especially where we are. We live in the south side of Chicago. I've been here for quite a while, but for some of you might be new to this area. And people wonder why we fund arts programs, and we fund it like these unnecessary things when people are struggling with homelessness and food deserts and these really pressing concerns. And I think it's even more important that we fund these arts programs in a time where people aren't secure in their most basic needs. I think that the self-actualization that's at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is actually the foundation of the pyramid. And we really learned that when people felt like they had control over their lives, they could change things. And it wasn't about whether people had housing or food or any of those other more basic things on the bottom of the pyramid if they didn't have the ability to self-actualize. So over the course of the summer, while we were community organizing, a really small group of about 10 women were able to take on the entire Indian government, which is like these really old men who are really powerful, and we were able to win time and time again. We were able to get a public toilet complex for like thousands of Indians. We were able to get a wage increase, and you should never stop fighting for what's right. And this is me and one of my coworkers, and human rights work doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be terrible, and you can laugh while doing it, but you should never, ever, especially in the darkest of times, stop fighting for what's right. Please, someone ask you a question. Laura.
Hi, Karen. Fancy seeing you here. Anna Harris again. She doesn't come often.
Yeah, Laura's right. I have one friend at Harris.
And it's me.
It's Laura.
Is the work you're doing this summer playing into your thesis? How is the work that you did this summer influencing your current work?
Oh man, okay, so like my big secret about being a Harris student is that I actually haven't graduated from undergrad yet, and I actually lied about this on my resume when I applied to my most recent jobs. I was like, graduated in 2016, but I actually haven't graduated yet. I'm really insecure about it because I feel like I'm not qualified to be amongst all you people who have achieved so much in the real world. But as a result, I am still writing my undergrad thesis, and I'm writing about South Asian civic engagement. And Faraz and I went to this conference last weekend where I thought a lot about South Asian civic engagement and how South Asians specifically are often both oppressors and the oppressed in America. So what I mean by that is that the first case that a South Asian American was involved in, Supreme Court case, was this case where this guy was claiming that he should be given the right to vote in America as an Indian American. And the foundation for his case was not that all naturalized citizens should have the right to vote. It was, he said, Indians were Aryan, and that was closer to whiteness than it was to other immigrants. And I think a lot about how I lived with my 99-year-old grandparents over the summer, and they're Brahmin, which is the highest caste in India, and they're really, really proud of that. But I was, during the day, organizing with these Dalit and Adivasi women, which are the lowest caste, the untouchables. And this is like my big thesis about South Asian civic engagement. And this guy who I talked to over the weekend also told me this, but I think it's really important for Indians and Indian Americans especially to think about racism in our own community and lower casteism before we can even start to think about what role we play in perpetuating racism in America, because those South Asians are the #1 victim of hate crimes against Asians. They're also, upholding these legacies of racism, like in this Supreme Court case. So I think it's really complicated. I'm thinking about it a lot, and I'm still writing my undergrad thesis. South Asians. Allie's like my second friend. I don't have any.
So was it challenging to connect with these women who have had such different experiences from your own, or did it just flow naturally? How did you achieve that?
And that's such a great question, whether it was hard to connect with people who had such different experiences than my own. And actually what I found to be the case was the exact opposite. Like, we would go and we'd teach these legal education trainings while literally sitting on the floor of people's homes, which is a very, very personal thing that people would invite us into their homes and have us basically tell them what was best for them, which I think is often such a dangerous thing in community organizing. And what we talked about a lot of the time was like, oh, like I have to go to my aunt's house this weekend, like, oh, I have to like attend like another wedding, which like sounds kind of silly, but like if you're in India, you have to go to weddings all the time, so it actually kind of like is a pain. And I found that like these things, like one of the girls that I trained was like, oh, I just had a fight with my sister, and I like fight with my sister all the time. So I was like, these things are so universal, and it's such a like naive and oversimplified answer to say like, we are all the same around the world, like no matter what. And I think that's just not true. Like some people are living under very, very hard circumstances, and it's really unfair to discount that. But I think there's a really big difference between acknowledging that some people are living in much harder circumstances than others and reducing people to just those circumstances. And I think that's really true, especially, I keep tying it back to the south side of Chicago, but people are like, oh, the south side is so terrible, and people's lives must be so hard. But I really think that reducing people to the worst thing in their lives or the worst thing that's ever happened to them is so unfair. And a couple of years ago, there was this like artist who came to Chicago who was like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but he has like people write on their like bodies like something that they're insecure about. Like, have you seen this? And so I participated in this project thinking it'd be this really empowering thing, and I was like, oh, this is the worst thing that's happened to me. Like, I don't want people to define me by it. And in the process of doing that, I felt like I was defining myself by the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And it felt so terrible. I hated it. And my friend and I like wrote this op-ed in the Maroon, which is like this really hated newspaper at the University of Chicago that I actually used to be the editor of, so I like really hate it when they play it. Because people put a lot of work into it. Anyway, so we wrote this op-ed that was like, this guy, in attempting to say that people aren't the worst thing that's ever happened to them, is like really reducing people to the worst thing that's happened to them. And I was so worried about doing that when I was community organizing in Delhi, because you know, people living in slums in Delhi, I think, really have it harder than almost like most people in the world. Like, the government has really forsaken them. They don't have access to education or, you know, sanitation. Maternal mortality is like the highest of anywhere in the world in some parts of India, and that's so unfair, and the government should be held accountable for that because that's so unfair. But I don't think that's where the story starts or ends, and I hope, like, if any of you guys have any takeaway from my 6 minutes of talking really fast up here, I hope you think about not only how important it is to have many stories, like Chimamanda Adichie says in her TED Talk, but how important it is to think about who's telling those stories, and how important it is that the people whose stories it is are the ones telling the stories, not people from the outside.
What is the grab bag candy game?
Oh, so there's this quote up here that was like really long, so I didn't read the whole thing out, but basically Toni Morrison was saying to, I don't know if she's a teacher, I think she's an author, but the beginning of the quote is like, I tell my students when you get these jobs that you've been so brilliantly trained for, which I think really speaks to like you Chicago students, like to remember that if you're free, your job is to free someone else. If you have power, your job is to empower someone else. This is not a grab bag candy game. And to me, the grab bag candy game is the system that a lot of students, especially at elite universities, and a lot of people in America really get sucked into, where you're always reaching for the next thing, like trying to get that next thing on your resume, the next accomplishment, trying to get that like thing that you know you're competing with others for, and you're just trying to accumulate as many accomplishments or achievements as possible. And sometimes that type of relentless pursuit of excellence can be very dangerous. And Toni Morrison says that this is not a grab bag candy game, and I was really forced to slow down when I was living in India and think about how it wasn't about just moving myself forward and trying to achieve all my dreams and all my goals, and how it was so important that I think about all the other things that are going on in the world and other people whose lives and stories matter. And it's so hard to do that because I think, especially being the child of like immigrant parents who gave up everything to move to America, my success was so important to them. And I felt like every time I wasn't achieving, I felt like I was letting them down. So I came to UChicago in my undergrad as a pre-med math major because I just really wanted my parents to be proud of me, and I wanted to be someone who was achieving a lot. And I just realized that, you know, it wasn't about achieving and getting all these great accomplishments to my name and just making my parents proud. It was about trying to be a mindful member of the world. And there's this like quote by Dumbledore who I really like. I'm really obsessed with Harry Potter, but I like recently stumbled upon this quote that I like don't remember from my first time reading the book, but I guess it was in the book, but I don't know. But it says that Dumbledore says basically like it was important to fight and fight again and keep fighting because only then could evil be kept at bay, if not completely eradicated. And I think as Harris students, it's so tempting to want to win that like policy competition or to get that prestigious fellowship, but the thankless work of fighting and fighting and fighting and losing and never stopping fighting even when you're always losing is the most important work. And I don't think everyone has to believe this. I know like so many econ majors as UChicago students who are playing the grab bag candy game, and some people can play that, but I think it's really important that there are like a couple people who aren't playing that, otherwise we'd all die. So stressful being on here. Okay, if no one has any more